And so, we decided on this Spinnerette chip, and part of it was that they're probably better company to work with than being a really good company to work with. So they'll support you as much as they can too. And then this is one of our open source things. So for a long time we've been publishing schematics and occasional layouts for different things. And the more so, we don't publish something unless we can support it usually. And so there were a lot of designs that we didn't care if anyone had, but we couldn't support people modifying them. Like if they called up our tech support question and said, I'm trying to build this product into this thing, and I don't know what I'm doing, it's like, well, we can't really help you either. And so if someone called and asked us, and they're like, I want, can I get a copy of the layout for this? I'm a business, I'm trying to do this. And we're like, oh yeah, sure, you can have it. But we didn't release anything in those specific license or anything like that. So now what we're trying to do is take advantage of all the open source licenses that have shown up in the last few years and start releasing hardware under license. And with the propeller, we're using the MIT license, which is a very open license. It doesn't restrict how you can use anything with it, but it does say software rated. And so with the Creative Commons license, it says this work. And so we can use that with hardware, so that's the license we're going to be using. So the PropScope hardware is released under that license, and the Spinnerette will be, along with new things that we work on. And so we want to make it as easy as possible for people to integrate our stuff into their stuff without them having to call us and get permission. So you'll probably see a lot more open source stuff. We actually have a section on our webpage now that lists products that are released as open source. And there's no good, we also want to make it so that you can use open source software to modify the product. So it turns out there's no real good cross-platform open source circuit board software. And so we found that DipTrace has a pretty good free non-commercial version. So we're converting all of our stuff to DipTrace, posting it in DipTrace format. And then we haven't been using the same company's software for schematic as for layout. So we don't have cross-linking netlist or anything like that. So our schematics are usually like vector images, so we're kind of posting them as editable vector images. So if you go on our webpage and talk to open source, you'll see a little logo on the right side of the page that says open source, and click on that and list all the open source stuff. That's pretty much it for stuff I have to say. If you have any questions, you can have a question answer session right now. You can ask about the Spinnerette, open source stuff, or the propeller, or just general Parallax questions. Michael? So he's asking how compatible is Timothy's Spinnerette stack with Harrison's Prop TCP. I don't know, I think Harrison is using the Magnachip 10 based T part that he has to write in his TCP stack. Whereas basically the code right now for the Spinnerette, like there's some example codes that connect to the Circle page. It's like tens of lines. So there's so little to it that you should be able to tie anything into it. So it's all going to be like HTML parsing stuff. And so if anyone else has written web-based stuff that separates out the TCP IP stack from the rest of it, it shouldn't be too difficult to integrate it in and just do changing. It's kind of like having APIs to change the calls. I asked about the price point. We're hoping to sell the spare board version for less than $50. So he's asking if it will be a standalone web server and if it will serve files off of the card. So we're hoping to sell two different markets. So one of them will be people that are using a propeller object. So that object will support all this stuff. And in your code, you can write something that instead of serving files, it serves whatever your code returns. But it will also be a version that is this really the same firmware running on it, but it will be unmodified. Whereas if you integrate stuff with the wrong thing, the unmodified version will get commands over the serial port to change variables that you can also change over a web interface with JavaScript. And so you can store a bunch of files on it, and it'll serve those files. You can also log in over FTP and upload files. And Actually, the EEPROM will only have a bootloader that reads out the SD card and then runs that program, so you can update it over FTP. And so out of the box, it'll basically do everything like the NetBurner modules do. But if you want to, it'll run your own stuff too. I don't know if it could be hooked into a hard drive. Probably not. Not unless you had like another microcontroller to transfer the data. The SD cards are relatively easy, low resources to interface to.
Some guy named Ken G online said you did a good job, but wants to know what the release date is.
Release date? So I talked about how we're going to do a contest with Biznet. This involves our marketing department, who is on maternity leave. So in October, she'll be back. And so that's where we're aiming to have it released, is sometime in October. It's $50 was the price we wanted. And we might have a special contest version. I haven't really looked too much into that yet, like throwing an SD card or something if you want to use it at the end of the contest. Okay, Prop 2 security. So someone on the forums pointed out that on FlyLogic's blog, someone had decapped the propeller. It was like a security expert just because he liked it and the security into it. But if you look at anything else on his blog, he goes over all the security of other chips. And there's kind of 2 points to security. One is to really stop someone from copying something, and one is to make it a little bit harder. And so most of what you see is trying to make things harder. So if you buy a DVD and you want to put it on your, like say on your iPhone or your iPod, it's perfectly legal to do that, or now it is. It wasn't for a few years. But you have every right to do it, but it's difficult because it's encrypted. And so what the Motion Picture Association is doing is making it difficult so that you'll just buy it on your iPhone as well as the DVD you bought. But it's still really easy to get by. And that has nothing to do with when you go to China and spend $1 and get a real press DVD of that movie. And that's where most of their loss of piracy is due. So they're not trying to stop piracy, they're trying to grow another market. And so when it comes to securing microcontrollers with little security bits, it stops the hobbyist who's playing around and might want to like copy that microcontroller or do something else. But you're not really going to lose a lot of business through that. What you lose business through is someone that copies the whole design and sells it to compete with you. It doesn't really stop them. It's all you do is take some acid that's pretty common that will melt the plastic away. There's another acid that melts the metal away that's really dangerous. We don't have to use that. You melt the plastic away and you use a pin to scratch away the glass layer and touch the metal layer and apply voltage and take it on and bypass the security. You don't need almost light to do it. So to build it into the propeller would require the EEPROM beyond the propeller, which would have made it a lot more expensive. It's a little different process for manufacturing. So the EEPROM's separate. And so with the next propeller EEPROM still separate, but what we're going to do is put a security, like we'll use this just like we'll use one time per minute, we'll use it to store a security key. And there'll be a symmetric cipher where you program the key into the propeller chip, and the only program that can read the key is what's in the boot ROM. So it'll boot up and read the key once it's read, it can't be read anymore. So you restart it and that's the boot ROM running again. And so it will read this key and then read the EEPROM and then decrypt it using that key. So the only way to bypass security at that point would be to get the contents of the key, which is going to be several layers down in the chip, and much more difficult to get to, even if you have the right technology. And we have what's called a focused ion beam that can actually drill into silicon and add metal. Even with that, it's very difficult to get into. Still never impossible. If the Chinese government wants to copy it, they'll copy it. But if some little company in Taiwan is trying to copy it, they're a lot less likely.